Hi, everyone. My name is Ranger Elise,
I'm Ranger Amanda.
and we are both park rangers that work for Allegheny County. So the county that the city of Pittsburgh is in is where we work, and we work in 9 different parks that are all around the county. And the 2 biggest parks that we work in are North Park and South Park. And there are park rangers that work all over the country in different parks, and they have a lot of different roles. And we have a lot of different roles that we fill for our jobs as Allegheny County Park Rangers. So one of the main things that we do is patrol the parks. So we are out in the parks talking to all of the visitors in the parks. If they need any help, if they have any questions, we try to answer their questions. We try to help them in any way possible. But we are also out just sort of checking on the parks. So hiking the trails, looking at the different things in the parks, trying to be basically the eyes and ears of the park, because the park can't really check on itself. So we are there to do that. And another big part of what we do is try to take care of the parks. So sometimes there are people who want to come out and join us, and they want to volunteer at the parks, and we help to set up different projects for them. And sometimes we do projects as rangers where we are cleaning up the parks, where we might be building new trails or closing old trails or fixing the trails that we have. We might be planting trees, we might be removing invasive species, maybe even planting meadows. So a lot of different things that we do to improve the parks. And then another big part of our job is teaching. So sometimes we have people come to the parks and we teach them. Sometimes we visit people at different schools and libraries and teach them. And sometimes we do virtual programs like this one today. And today we are going to be talking about winter animals. So about some of the different animals that live in our area and exactly what happens in winter for those animals.
So before we start talking about the animals specifically, I want you guys to take a moment to think about what winter is like. So think about the kinds of clothes you wear in the wintertime. Maybe think about the food you eat during the wintertime. Maybe think about the activities you like to do. Think about what the weather is like. And then think about how this is different than other seasons of the year. So how is summer different than winter? Are you doing the same activities? Are you eating the same foods? Is the weather the same? And then after you consider these questions and kind of have your mind thinking about summer versus winter, think about what kind of challenges might face animals that live outside in the wintertime. I know I get very cold easily, and so cold can be a big challenge, getting enough layers on, eating hot foods. Summertime is really nice because it's green and there's lots of sun and flowers and just tons of things out, bird song, bugs, butterflies flying around. So summer is a very abundant time when there's lots of food. It rains a lot, so there's lots of water out. But winter is different. Like I mentioned, it's colder, and you might notice that there isn't any green leaves, there aren't any bugs out. So not only is the water gone because it's cold and frozen, but also those food sources that animals like to eat, like the berries, the bugs, the flowers, and any of the fruits and nuts that our plants produce, those are gone too. So think about, what do you think you would do if all your food and water was gone? How do you think you would feel if you were really, really thirsty and really hungry and you didn't have anything, you didn't have any water and you didn't have any food to eat? So because there is no food and no water, animals go through changes in order to be able to get enough to eat and enough to drink and be able to stay warm. So we're going to be talking about different changes in how they benefit animals and how these changes can help them survive that cold, dark winter time. So they're generally grouped into 3 categories. So the first category is called migration. So a change might be that the animal just goes somewhere new, goes to a new environment, a new habitat that is warmer, has lots of water, and has food. A second change an animal might go through is that it might decide to hibernate or sleep through the winter, so it doesn't have to worry about finding food or finding water or staying warm, because it will build up a lot of fat in the fall and be able to live off of that and stay warm with that fat all winter. And then sometimes animals stay here in the same environment all winter long, and they just make either behavioral or changes on their bodies to be able to survive the winter. So they might grow a new coat, they might change what they're eating, but they can stay here because they have those different things that help them survive. So we're going to go through some different animals now and describe to you, maybe take a guess what you think this animal might do in the winter, and then we'll explore more about that animal and its strategy for overcoming the lack of food and water that winter.
So we're going to go ahead and share our screen really quickly.
So like I mentioned, there's 3 different categories of changes that we consider when animals are going through winter. The first one is that they might move away or migrate to a new place. The second one is that they might sleep the winter away, which we call hibernate. And the third one is that they stay here, they tough it out, and they adapt or they change to be better for the winter.
So the first animal that we are going to look at is the monarch butterfly. And we have monarch butterflies in our area. You can see them in any of the 9 county parks. And one of the main things to think about when considering what a monarch butterfly might do in the winter is, what does a monarch butterfly eat? So as you can see in this picture, this butterfly is perched on a flower and it is drinking nectar from the flower. So if the monarch butterflies rely on flowers, the flower's nectar as a main food source, in the winter, it would be kind of hard for them to stay in our area. So monarch butterflies are migrators. And they actually migrate south down to Mexico, and some of them can migrate as far as 3,000 miles. So you can see on this map, it shows where some of the monarch butterflies might be migrating from across the country, but they all migrate to a certain location or certain locations in Mexico where they overwinter or stay until it gets warmer, and then they migrate back to our area. So the monarch is one example of a migrator that we can find in our area.
So this animal is one of my favorites in our area. This is the little brown bat. It's not the only type of bat that we have in Pennsylvania. There are 9 types of bats, and only 2 of them migrate. So there's 2 species of bats that will move to a new habitat, a new location where it's warmer and there's more food. But the little brown bat is one that stays in our area. So I'll let you take a moment to guess, knowing that it stays in our area, if it hibernates or adapts. So the little brown bat is one that hibernates. So if you're not familiar with hibernation, it's a type of deep sleep where the breathing rate and the heart rate of the animal drop really, really low so that it uses less energy, and it is just basically a really, really, really deep sleep. So like I mentioned before, animals that hibernate spend all summer and fall eating lots and lots of food so they can get really fat, and they will use that fat to support their body in the energy needs it needs so that they don't have to go find food. And while hibernation is a deep sleep, sometimes if you get too close to a hibernating animal or disturb it too much, it can wake up. And especially for bats, they have something called white nose syndrome that's affecting them, where fungus can get on boots or animals and can be tracked into the caves or the forest that these bats are hibernating in. And it will grow, that fungus will grow on their nose, and it makes it hard to breathe, and they will wake up. And so that's how that can harm that bat that's hibernating, because it wakes up too early. So it's important to be mindful of hibernating areas or hibernating animals in the areas that they hibernate in, so that you don't disturb them as much as possible.
So our next animal is a black bear, and this one might be a little bit tricky, because when we think of black bears or bears, I think we all think of a certain way that they survive the winter. I certainly did, until I learned that a black bear is not necessarily a hibernator. That's what I think that we all normally think of whenever we think about bears. They are something that is actually called a torpor, which means that they go into half hibernation almost. So they don't do the full hibernation where they are in that deep, deep sleep. And it can be dangerous for them to wake up, kind of like the little brown bat in its hibernation. So a black bear can actually wake up during hibernation if it needs to forage for some more food. Although, as Ranger Amanda said, they also are eating a lot in preparation for winter and trying to get those fat layers so that they can survive in their den or wherever it is that they are. But they are not actual full hibernators. They are kind of that half hibernator, where they might be awake in the winter, but they are trying to sleep and hibernate, but they're not classified as a hibernator.
So this animal is a beaver, and they are super cool. They're really good at manipulating their environment to suit their needs. So I'll let you take a moment to guess if you think the beaver migrates, hibernates, or adapts. So you might have taken a hint from this picture and noticed that there's snow behind this beaver, and to guess that it adapts. So a beaver will stay in the same environment all year, and even though they live in the water, and water can often be cold and can often freeze over, the beaver has ways to overcome that challenge. So you can see in the bottom of the slide a little cross section of what a beaver habitat might look like. So beavers are known for building dams that you can see on the left side of the bottom of the picture, which holds back water in order to give the beaver enough room to swim. They build a home called a lodge that has its opening underneath the water so that the beaver predators can't get in, which when the pond or lake that a beaver lives in freezes over in the winter can pose a challenge, because how are they supposed to get out of the water if it's frozen over and that's the only entrance? So in order to overcome that challenge and still be able to get food all winter, they will bring a bunch of sticks and leaves and branches and other things that they like to eat underwater, which is what you can see in the middle of that white picture at the bottom, that food cache. So they'll store extra food underneath the water to eat in the wintertime in case it freezes over. But beavers have specialized fur that has two different layers. They have a warm layer, and then they have a layer that keeps them mostly waterproof. So that way, if they do come out of the water in the wintertime, they're not freezing cold and they're still able to go find food and stay warm. So oftentimes the beaver will still fatten up for winter so that they can have that extra layer of protection against the cold and stay warm. And a lot of that fat goes into their tail so that they can use that energy throughout the winter, which I think is really cool.
So we're going to go ahead and stop sharing for 1 second so that we can show you some of the things that Ranger Amanda just talked about. So this, let's see if I can hold it up enough. Maybe can you hold it sideways?
Yeah, hold it sideways.
This is the beaver's fur. So this is the beaver's pelt. And the beaver has really, really thick fur, like Ranger Amanda said. And we'll try to get close enough where we can show you the two different layers of fur. So if you see this fur right here, This is the really, really warm, soft fur underneath that keeps the beaver warm in the winter. And then these are kind of the longer hairs on top that help the beaver to be basically waterproof. And this is sort of the top or bottom layer of a beaver's tail. So you can see it kind of looks like a piece of leather or maybe even a football. That's kind of the texture that it has and how it feels as well. And as Ranger Amanda said, they will store fat in their tail. So their tail is normally thicker and there's a top layer and a bottom layer. But this is something that also helps them when they are adapting to the winter.
So before we go back to our PowerPoint, I want to show you another fur of an animal that stays in our area all winter and makes changes. So go ahead, take a look at this animal's fur. Take a moment to think of if you have a guess what kind of animal this is or if you've ever seen one. So this animal is our red fox. And like I mentioned, this animal stays here all winter, and you can see how fluffy this coat is and how fluffy this tail is. And this really helps keep the fox warm. So they are out there hunting all winter. And so the long coat acts as a coat, like if you might put on your big puffy coat in the winter time. And then this tail that Ranger Elise showed you is really, really fluffy. Like this doesn't have any stuffing in it. You can see how squishy it is. It's all fur. And when the fox curls up to sleep, they will put this tail right over their nose and their face to keep it warm. And it acts like a scarf. So I wear a scarf to keep my face warm and my neck warm when I'm outside in the wintertime. And the fox still has that in their tail. They even grow fur longer on their paws between their toes that will protect the bottom of their feet from the cold snow and ice. And that would be like your boots or your gloves that you wear to keep your hands and your feet warm.
So I'm going to go ahead and share our screen again. Let's get back to there we go.
So here's a picture of the red fox. You can see what it would look like in nature. In the summertime, the fox will shed that really fluffy coat, so it will look really skinny and not as fluffy because it doesn't need all that warm fur on it in the summer because it gets really, really hot here. But besides changing the way it looks, the red fox also changes what it eats. So take a moment to think, maybe think of some ideas, what you think a fox might eat. So in the summertime, a fox eats a lot of berries and bugs. They eat small rodents, but they eat a lot of different things from plants to animals. But in the wintertime, when there aren't plants around, they will almost eat just meat. They'll eat small rodents like mice and voles. And you can see in the picture, this fox has really big ears. And those ears help the fox be able to hear those small animals, even if there's snow on the ground. So I know if I tried to catch a mouse underneath a bunch of snow, it would be almost impossible. Probably definitely impossible. I can't even catch a mouse with no snow. But those ears help that fox be able to pinpoint where the mouse is or the other animal underneath the snow, and then it will leap up, use its tail as balance, and be able to come down right on top of it to be able to get that tasty meal.
So I'm going to show you, well, as we said, the red fox adapts. This next animal is one that we can see in our region, and I want you to take a second to think, what category would the snowy owl fall into? So do we think that that would be an adapter, a migrator, or a hibernator? So you might think because there's snow in the background that maybe it's not a hibernator because it looks like it's out in the snow. And you would be right, it is not a hibernator. The snowy owl is interesting because it is a migrator. And it is not in our region all the time. But instead of the snowy owl migrating somewhere where it's warm, we actually see the snowy owl in our region if it gets cold enough. So the snowy owl might migrate down to our region if our region gets cold enough for the snowy owl to be able to live here, because our region might have more prey than the region that it was in, where it normally calls home. So the snowy owl can migrate into our region, but only if it's cold enough, which is a little different than the migrators that we normally think of that are trying to leave our region to find an area that's warmer.
So I'm sure you are all familiar with the groundhog. It's one of the most common animals we can see day to day. I see groundhogs all the time in the summer. So think about what you think a groundhog does in the winter. Do you think it migrates? Do you think it adapts and stays active all winter, or do you think it hibernates? So the groundhog is one of the animals in our area that's a true hibernator, which means it goes to sleep all winter. It is hard to wake up, and it's not like the bear, where the bear will get up and move around sometimes, maybe go get a snack. The groundhog sleeps all winter, and it's one of the only animals in our area to do that. The groundhog only eats plants, so it's a good thing that it sleeps all winter, because it would not find any plants right now in our area.
So our last animal is a raccoon. So same thing, take a second to guess if you think it is an adapter, a migrator, or a hibernator. And our friend the raccoon is one of those special words that we talked about earlier. So the same as the black bear, they are a torpor, which means that they are in that kind of halfway hibernation. So they do prefer to stay inside of their homes. They try to fatten up so that they can survive the winter, but they will sometimes wake up, they will sometimes be out, they will sometimes be foraging for food. And if you see a raccoon that is out in the wintertime, it does not necessarily mean that it might be sick. If you see it in the daytime, it just means that maybe it is hungry or maybe it was woken up, but it's okay because it's not a true hibernator and it is a torpor. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing our screen. And we just want to say thank you so much to all of you for joining us and learning a little bit more about the animals in our area and what they do in the wintertime and how they are able to survive in the winter. So we hope that you had fun. We hope that you learned a little bit about the animals that we talked about, and thank you so much.